back to Parys, the one in the Free State, where the entire 2019 South African cross-country series is about to come to an end. All that remained was one last loop consisting of 170 kilometers of varied terrain across the Free State veld. But first things first. The Parys 400 took place on the same day as another little sporting event in Japan called the Rugby World Cup Final. The entire cross-country fraternity united behind the Springboks as the race was stopped in order for everyone to enjoy England's thrashing first. With the Webb Ellis Trophy safely secured, it was time to don the helmets and start those engines for the final time in 2019. As the race leaders, it was now up to Henk Lodegan and Brett Cummings to open up the road from behind the wheel of their Toyota Gazoo racing SA Hilux. This time though, and seeing that 40 cars had traversed the route on the first loop, the conditions would have been perfect for Lodegan. But they would have been equally perfect for Chris Visser and Donnie Stassen, who set off in their Atlas Copco in an effort to close the gap of 1 minute 12 seconds. The Voigt brothers, Ralph and Andre, were the next ones to start the loop and the leading special vehicle by quite some margin, whilst Clint Weston and Gerrit Sneeman started from 4th overall as the third Class FIA vehicle. They were followed by the Class T Brat Pack, consisting of the Ford of Lance Woolridge and Ward Huxtable, the Atlas Copco Hilux of Gary Berthold and Jeff Minott, and the second Castrol Ford Ranger, driven by the Brazilians, Marcus Boomgaard and Clever Cincia. Remember, the difference between all these cars was a mere 1 second, so the battle on Loop 2 promised to be fierce. But before we can tell you about how that battle ended, let's shift our attention to the series as a whole. The South African Cross Country Championship is internationally regarded as one of the very best, but also toughest and most competitive championships on the planet. Our drivers and navigators have made a name for themselves on the Dakar stage, and the car that won the 2019 edition of the world's toughest race was built here in Johannesburg. So it's no wonder then that international competitors flocked to South Africa to be part of it, and the Parys 400 was no different. This is what some of our international drivers and co-drivers had to say before the start of the race. And after 2 days of racing, this is what they had to say come the end of the event.
We love the country and the people, and it's always very nice here. We have a good time. The racing is good, so we always keep coming back.
Well, to be honest with you, at the end of the day, look at the conditions, the atmosphere here. It's beautiful. You get to race with the best. You with the best terrain, best machinery, and the best company. So why not? Why wouldn't you come back here?
Racing in South Africa is very rough. We have to push hard to keep the car going. So, but it's a pleasure to us racing with you guys. It's a really nice championship, and we always inviting the guys in Brazil to race with you.
A feather in the cap for sure for all South Africans involved in cross-country racing, and on the day, the Boks won their 3rd World Cup as well. But let's see how it all panned out at the end of the season that consisted of no less than 6 events that covered more than 3,000 kilometers across Southern Africa and Botswana. And this is how it all ended for the Warriors in the categories for the side-by-side vehicles, who completed their first full season as a full-blown class with national championship status. Champions Werner and Leon Mostert enjoyed a fairly dominant season, but it didn't quite end the same way. Mostert ran into trouble on Loop 2 and was classified as the last side-by-side finisher to complete the race. Paraplegic driver Vickers Haasbroek and Jurgen Smith also won a race earlier this year, but they too had some issues on the final day and only finished 5th. They were beaten to the line by the identical Can-Am Maverick of Theo Erasmus and Edward Odendahl, who lost time on Loop 1 but fought back to set the fastest time of all on Loop number 2. Even so, they missed out on a podium position as they were beaten to 3rd place by Christo Rose and Dirk Swart. This meant that Peter Walter and Sean de Villiers raced their Can-Am to a 2nd step of the podium. And after 2 second-place finishes this season, it was a first victory for Dierwold van Breda and Johan de Toy. They started from third but stayed out of trouble to record a well-deserved maiden win by around 8 minutes. Class P of the special vehicle category saw a fight between Julio Ferreira alongside Mohamed Mulson, McAnally brothers Keith and Andrew, as well as the KZN crew of Trace Price-Moore and Sean Braithwaite. When the checkered flag was waved, it was Ferreira who claimed the final podium spot by finishing in third, and Parys saw the comeback of the McAnallys, who competed for the first time in 2019 on the national tour. It was a welcome return that saw them claim second position, but Parys also saw a dream come true for Trace Price-Moore and Sean Braithwaite, who went on to claim a Class P victory at their first time from stepping out of KZN Regionals to national status. In Class A of the special vehicle category, it wasn't the ending that Sandra Jonk had hoped for in her first season as a driver after swapping seats inside the Total Agri Porter. Sandra and husband Jaco finished fourth after battling with a misfire that robbed the normally powerful Porter of valuable horses. Ahead of Jonk, the Masagi brothers Tahir and Tala were on course to claim a top step, but an oil pressure light came on just 20 kilometers into the second loop. They stopped the striker to investigate but couldn't find anything, and then nursed the car home to finish in third. In the end, they were beaten to the line by cross-country stalwarts John Thompson and Marisa Matten in the Zarco Challenger. The gap between Thompson and the Masagis was around 2.5 minutes. It was pretty easy to work out that the special vehicle leader after loop number 1 went on to claim their first ever national victory overall as well. The Voigt brothers, Ralph and Andre, had a comfortable lead after blitzing the field in loop number 1 and then continued to dominate during loop number 2 to end up with a winning margin of around 6 minutes. Confirmation of Dierwold van Breda's side-by-side victory over Peter Walter and Christo Rose. Trace Price-Moore took the top step in Peas ahead of the McAnallys, with Ferreira in third, and a very popular win for the Voigt brothers in Class A ahead of Thompson and the Masagi brothers, rounding out off the podium. After 6 races across southern Africa, the top drivers in the special vehicle category got to spray champagne for the final time in 2019. It was bittersweet for side-by-side winners Dierwold van Breda and Johan de Toy though.
Great racing from our side-by-side.
Yeah, we started yesterday and we hanged back and tried to be safe, especially for the lurkers. And yesterday was a dusty affair and this morning it was muddy. So we had all 3 seasons in one day. Yeah, it was beautiful.
Class B also saw new winners in the form of Trace Price-Moore and Sean Braithwaite. In fact, all 3 class winners of the special vehicle category were first-time winners in Parys, including the Voigt brothers, who ended victorious to take the Class A victory.
We had really a hell of a good time. The track was suited for our car. We had a good time out there.
The Parys 400 and the entire 2019 South African cross-country series was nearing its end, with all or most of the production cars returning to the designated service park and stopping the clock. It was time to make the calculations. It was an easy one for Class S, as champion David Huddy already retired from the race early on, which left the way open for cross-country chairman Archie Rutherford and his young son Kent to claim a well-earned class win in the trusty old Hilux. That was all she wrote for Class S in 2019, but what about the hotly contested Class T? We had only a single second separating 3 cars. Mark leaderboard, and that battle would continue on the second and last loop. But let's first have a look at the competitors further down the order, like Dylan Fenter and Donovan Lubber, who failed to complete loop number 1 after an impact. The 4x4 Mega World squad repaired the car during the rugby to successfully complete loop number 2. Force Prinsloo and Andre Vermeulen were classified 7th in their ex-Woolridge Motorsport Ford Ranger. The pairing actually had a great run and would have finished a lot higher was it not for an 18-minute penalty they received for for deviating from the route after a small wrong slot, which dropped them way down the order. And the exact same thing happened to Gary Berthold and Jeff Minott. The Atlas Copco Hilux was in the fight for a class win at the start of the loop, but they too took a wrong turn and received the harshest penalty that dropped them down from a potential class win to 6th in Class T. They finished behind the ATS Ford Ranger of Richard Leek and Zahir Badania, who lost loads of time on Loop 1 after hitting a rock and therefore started Loop 2, also way down the order. Leek Jr., the son of multiple South African champion navigator, fought back bravely on Loop 2, but 5th was as high as he could climb come the end. There were still 3 podium positions up for grabs and no less than 4 cars in with a shout. The Ford Ranger, driven by Harry Smith resident Jacques Van Tonder, this time with rally navigator Nico Swartz reading the notes, was one of them. But despite having a clean run on Loop 2, Van Tonder had no choice but to settle for 4th, missing out on a podium finish by just 1 minute and 27 seconds. This of course meant that they were beaten to the line by the Malalan Toyota Hilux of Johan Horn, this time with Leander Pienaar reading the notes. The former Class T champion endured a torrid season, but managed to battle his way through all the bad luck to at least finish the season on the podium after losing the rear brake on loop number 1 and picking up his fair share of flat tyres throughout the weekend. And then it all came down to this, a 3-way fight for Class T honours, which became a 2-way fight between the Castrol Ford cross-country Ranger teammates of Lance Woolridge and Ward Huxtable and their Brazilian pairing of Marcus Boomgaard and Kleber Cincia. Woolridge, the newly crowned South African champion, started the loop with a 1-second advantage over his Brazilian teammates in an identical Ford Ranger, but Boomgaard clearly enjoyed the conditions here in Parys and found a bit of extra speed late on loop 2 to edge ahead of his teammates. When the checkered flag was waved, it was Boomgaard who took the win ahead of Woolridge. It was by far the Brazilian's best performance in a number of outings on South African soil, and a well-deserved one too.
Now they wait for the ticket clock to start.
So after 400 kilometers of flat-out racing, this is what the scoreboard looked like for the teams in Class S and T of the production vehicle category. Archie Rutherford and son Kent survived the tough conditions to claim victory in Class S, while Parys provided the Brazilian crew of Boomgaard and Cincia with the location of their first ever overall Class T victory on South African soil. The sweet taste of victory champagne then went to Rutherford and son Kent.
We love to. We're glad we're home. Our first win together as father and son in the S-Class. We're very chuffed.
And what a drive by the Brazilians, who tasted champagne from the top step of the podium for the first time since taking on the South Africans on South African soil.
For me, it's a magic. Now here in South Africa, it's the best rally do you have in the world. Maybe it's good for us, we learn a lot.
All that was left now was to count down the finishers in Class FAA and see who would occupy the top step of the podium. Redline Motorsports' Ernst Roberts and Henry Kerner had high hopes of finishing the season with a Class FIA podium, but it wasn't to be for the very fast gentleman racer. They hit a rock on Loop 2, which destroyed a few crucial parts of their Nissan Navara, forcing them to the sidelines for the rest of the event. This allowed Redline Motorsport teammates Thomas Bell and Patrick McMurrin to do what they do best, and that is to safely reach the finish line, just like they did at the 2019 Dakar earlier this year. The British team, based out of Dubai, claimed another finish, but they were beaten to the Parys 400 finish by the Alf Renault Duster squad of Johan and Sean Van Staden, who crossed the finish line in 7th place after losing loads of time the day before. Van Staden's woes allowed German driver Daniel Schroeder with Italian co-driver Ryan Bland to sneak into 6th in the Premier Class FIA from behind the wheel of their Nissan Navara. And someone who had high hopes of finishing on the Class FIA podium, especially after qualifying near the top of the leaderboard, was Clint Weston and new navigator Gerrit Sneeman. They actually had a great weekend, but ran into some trouble and a few rocks that caused no less than 2 punches on the last loop, forcing the former circuit racer to take it easy over the last few kilometers in order to simply reach the finish. They did exactly that though, and claimed 5th place in Class FIA, their highest finish to date. We were now nearing the business end of the Parys 400 as the final podium positions still had to be decided. Toyota Gazoo Racing SA's Janelle de Villiers and Spanish co-driver Alex Harrow would have preferred to be part of the fight at the top for the podium, but the Dakar pairing experienced technical issues the day before. On the Saturday though, de Villiers showed his mettle by setting the fastest lap time of all on loop number 1 and followed it up with the second fastest time on loop number 2 to claw his way back to 4th place in Class FIA. so de Villiers missed out on the podium, but his Toyota Gazoo Racing SA teammates didn't. Shamir Varioa and co-driver Jean Moore started the last loop with nothing to lose, and it showed as they put the hammer down. And in Varioa's own words, he tried to break the car, but simply couldn't. His reward, another podium finish. So with that settled, all that remained was to see who would take the final win. And the contenders, Toyota Gazoo Racing SA's Henk Latergan and Brett Cummings, and Atlas Copco's Chris Visser and Donnie Stassen. The young Latergan entered the final loop of the season with a small advantage over the old fox of Visser, so Visser had to throw caution to the wind in an effort to catch up to the youngster. In typical Visser fashion, that's exactly what he did, but young Latergan was simply too fast on the day. The newly crowned champion showed why he is just that, by slowly pulling away from Visser and opening up a gap not even the former champion could do anything about. The winning margin come the end of play, 5 minutes to the favour of Latergan and a near perfect drive. So this is how it all panned out, with Henk Latergan finishing a championship winning year with his 4th victory of the season, ahead of old dog Chris Visser, and Shamir Varioa claiming 3rd overall ahead of de Villiers and Weston. It was time for the overall winners to spray bubbly from the winners' podium, with Latergan having the final say in the 2019 SA Cross Country Series.
Yeah, it's been an awesome day. Had a good day in the car. Springboks won, so everybody's happy.
And that was it from Parys and the final round of the 2019 South African Cross Country Series. Thank you for joining us.